Hello and welcome to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we will continue our team preview series with the AFC East, specifically the New England Patriots. If you haven't checked out the first 16 team previews, please do so. I've made them as evergreen as possible. I realize there will be some changes between now and week one, but still plenty of helpful info in there. So without further ado, your 2020 New England Patriots Fantasy Football Team Preview. Starts with the guy I have been so high on Cam this entire offseason. And look, I realize there's risk here. We have Cam Newton, who has not been a healthy and thus a good quarterback since the first half of the 2018 season. Here's the thing, though, everyone. We aren't being asked to draft 2012, 2011 through 2017 Cam Newton. Right now, we're being asked to draft banged up, injury-prone Cam Newton. That's why his ADP has, barely risen since this whole thing happened, and he's still only looking at the QB 18, QB 19. I'm not asking you to take a dive into the deep end and take Cam Newton as a QB 1. I'm asking you to take him as a late round QB with the rushing floor and with proven top 8 QB upside. And that's all we've seen from Cam whenever he's been healthy. In terms of just fantasy finishes, we had a guy that was consistent top 5 fantasy QB, the first 5 years of his career. And even when things started going, a little bit south, in 2018, the guy was still QB 8 in fantasy points per game. So I think that anyone that, is projecting Cam to be outside of, the top 12 to 15 QBs with 16 games just isn't being realistic about what this guy is capable of doing. He's never been this, passer that struggles to pick apart defenses from the pocket. It's almost like his just rushing ability has overshadowed the ability he does have as a passer. And I realize N'Keal Harry, Mohamed Sanu, Julian Edelman is hardly, the best group of receivers for a quarterback to be throwing to, but look back at these Panthers teams, and if you got an empty stomach, look back at the Auburn team that Cam led to a national title. This guy's made a career not having, great passing assets to throw the ball to, and it just hasn't mattered. So, athleticism likely won't be there, but I just think the price point he's at just isn't even a little bit reflective of the upside that a seemingly healthy Cam Newton can bring to the table. And I know some people are sticking to this being competition between, Jarrett Stidham and Cam Newton. Look, if Cam loses this competition, that sucks. I'm gonna look like a little bit of an idiot, but it's not like you're burning a top 5 fantasy pick on Cam. You can get him in, almost a mid double-digit rounds, if not early double-digit rounds, in most non-superflex drafts. So, it's a 2019 fourth-round pick and Brian Hoyer that Cam has to beat out. If he's not able to do it, fine. But I really think this is a situation, where we can assume rational coaching a little more than other places. If this was a different team where Cam was being asked to be a square peg fitting into a round hole, maybe there'd be more concern that they'd stay with the old guard, Jarrett Stidham. But, you look at the Patriots, and I keep going back to 2016 when Brady was suspended, Garoppolo was hurt, and they had to, put in Jacoby Brissett, rookie, on a short week against the Texans. What'd they do? They revamped the entire offense to his strengths, ran a bunch of triple option stuff. PFF Seth Galina has an awesome article you can find on PFF.com where he breaks down all of this. And, this is what the Patriots have been doing Belichick's entire tenure. They form their team around their players' talents, and they attack their defense's weaknesses. I think Cam Newton, when he's on, can do that better than almost anyone. And I think Belichick is going to unleash him in the best way possible. I am all in on Cam Newton. And luckily, everyone, it just doesn't take much to get that upside. So, hey, if someone reaches on Cam as a top 10 quarterback in your draft, so be it. I'm not asking you to do that. But just realize that on that QB1 borderline, give me Cam over these statues 8 days of the week. Moving on to the Patriots' ever murky backfield now. And, it's just another year pretty much in New England. We have Sony Michel, looking like a candidate to start the season on the PUP list. It's a foot injury now, in addition to chronic knee injuries. Even before all this, with the mid-30s ADP, just a tough guy to get behind. That last season to have the opportunities he did to take over and just the overall touches and not to accomplish that. We've only seen 9 running backs over the past 10 years get at least 250 touches and not finish as a top 24 PPR performer. And Sony Michel was one of those backs. For some guys, David Montgomery is one of them where he had the same thing happen. But you look at the Bears running back room and you think, okay, well, maybe they phase out Tariq a little bit and Montgomery could get some extra targets. I just don't see a path to that happening for Sony here. I mean, James White is locked in as the pass down back. We know Rex Burkhead, when he is healthy, they're going to try to get him double-digit touches per game, particularly with the targets. And now you have Damien Harris, who didn't do anything last year, but, it'd be very surprising to see, a third-round pick for the Patriots never get a chance to have any sort of run. So I'm pretty much fading Sony, just in all formats, even with the reduced cost. And honestly, these running backs in general, I mean, Damien Harris, I think, is worthy of just a late round dart throw. He is so cheap. Again, it's not quite the Cam situation. He's even a little cheaper than that, but it's, you're not going to look back on your fantasy team in 4 months and say, wow, I really, if I hadn't have taken Damien Harris in round 15, things really would have been better. And, just looking at the Patriots starting the season, did a pod with PFF's Kent Wyrock recently, and, the Patriots are really popping for having a great start against, shady run defenses. We got week 1 against the Dolphins, week 2 against the Seahawks, week 3 against the Raiders, week 4 against the Chiefs. We got the Broncos 49ers after that. So I'm not saying, Harris is going to boom all season or anything like that. But at a minimum, I think, Harris is definitely worthy of an early season roster spot because he's going to have the matchups. And, if we can get a week 1 under our belt where we see him, he's got this 50-60% snap roll, he's going to be an auto start in those ensuing matchups. James White, I am just a little bit lower on. And I know some people are thinking, hey, what could he do? But Cam, the way he fed McCaffrey in 2018, I just think they're different team setups. I think a lot of what White brought to the table was, having that chemistry and just kind of long time spent with Brady. He's still going to be the pass down back, but, we've seen White have, pretty severe on-off splits when Burkhead's healthy throughout his career. He's not the feature pass game back. When Burkhead is there, they split it up. Ultimately, I think the kind of usual adage rings true for the Patriots backfield. Draft the cheapest guy available. That's Damien Harris. I know I didn't mention Lamar Miller at all. It's just hard for me to get behind him at this point. Seems like he was brought in more as Sony, injury assurance. And I'd be very shocked if they give Lamar Miller the shot over Harris to begin with. He is, again, so cheap enough that, again, it's not going to wreck your fantasy team to take a shot on Lamar Miller. But I'm definitely going to the well with Harris before Miller personally. So moving on to the wide receivers. Not great. The Patriots did not do a very good job this offseason of addressing the unit, so they must feel at least decent about the guys they got. And to be fair, this unit was all sorts of banged up by the end of last season. N'Keal Harry started the year on IR. Edelman had, one ailment after another, seemingly in the entire second half. Mohamed Sanu was also playing through all sorts of pain. And it's just a thing where we should assume Edelman is going to be that guy. He's been their number one. Only Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, and Allen Robinson have more targets than Julian Edelman. I understand Brady likes to feed the slot, but, even if that goes down 20%, we're still looking at, a gaudy target total for Julian Edelman. And I know Cam doesn't have the same experience, but, when we go back and look at some of these splits, it's really important just to remember the personnel these guys were working with. Okay, when Cam had Christian McCaffrey, it makes sense to throw him that many passes. But I don't think it's fair to say Cam doesn't target slot receivers when you look back at his career, and he just has never really had all that many talented slot receivers, just wide receivers in general, honestly, if you remove Steve Smith and kind of the last 2 years of his Panthers time from the equation. So I do think Edelman presents some value, at that wide receiver, kind of 30 range. He should be the undisputed number 1 on the squad. And, it's just hard to get that at that point. Upside is a little bit limited without Brady. I get it. It definitely doesn't help, but I think Edelman is, it's concerning, but that concern is fully being baked into his price. This was a guy going, top 12, top 15 wide receivers last year. So it's one of these things where you deserve to be lower on him, and everyone is lower on him. Because of that, his price point isn't all that bad. Same kind of reasoning for, your AJ Greens, T.Y. Hilton, Stephon Diggs of the world. There are concern, but at the end of the day, they are the projected number 1 pass game target in an offense, and that does hold value to it. Now, Harry or Sanu is where it gets a little bit interesting. One of these guys could very well be the man on the outside for this offense and Newton. I lean Harry, and I know last year wasn't pretty, but just we know what we're getting with Mohamed Sanu. The ceiling's never quite been there. He's now an aging receiver that, last year showed signs of the wear and tear. Both of them are free at this point, and Harry, he looked like the best wide receiver in the class going into last season. I understand it didn't work out that way, and people may have very well not had him number one. I'm not even saying I did, but there were stretches, where he showed off just that contested catchability at Arizona State, and even some, underrated yak that he was able to accomplish that I just think is going a little bit under the radar. No, last season was not good. He struggled to separate and all that, but didn't have a lot of favors done for him and trying to play hurt. I do think we could see a slight bounce back from the N'Keal Harry. Doesn't cost much to invest. Personally, I haven't been coming away with many Patriots receivers throughout the offseason in these fantasy drafts. But if I had, gun to my head, take a late round stab at the position, it would be Harry over Sanu. The tight ends aren't going to do much this year, everyone. And they tried to bring in two. We have Devin Asiasi and then Dalton Keene. Seemingly, Asiasi is going to be the Rob Gronkowski of the group. Now, I am in no way trying to compare the two, but, they're going back to their two tight end. Seemingly, they want to go back to that system with Asiasi being more of the inline Gronk role and then Keene being the move, H-back tight end that, we saw a little more from Aaron Hernandez back in the day. So, unfortunately, it's just we're not going to see much here. Both these guys were third-round picks. Maybe the Patriots got some steals, but we've only seen Gronk and Evan Ingram function as a top 12 rookie tight end since 2010. The position as a whole just really struggles to do much, which makes sense. When you're being asked to be a full-time receiver and blocker, that's a lot harder to do than, if you were just a receiver being asked to pick up that, two completely different features of the game. We will see if they are ready. We don't know their target share. They could very easily split the way. I do have Asiasi as my rookie tight end one above Adam Trautman and Cole Kmet, just because it does seem like the Patriots are setting him up for future success. But, my rule has always been do not draft rookie tight ends, not even if there's a fire. So I'm sticking to that for the time being. Keene and Asiasi future upside be damned. So, quickly going through the ranks, I have Cam as my QB 13, one spot behind Joe Burrow, one spot ahead of Matt Ryan. This is that rushing floor, guys, and I understand he's probably not going to be scoring 10 rushing touchdowns again, but, he has a long way to go before we're looking at him as anything other than, a dual threat quarterback. Again, in NFL history, it's Lamar Jackson, Mike Vick, and Cam Newton pretty much in terms of just the most productive guys at the position. So even if we're seeing, 80% Cam back there, that 80% is going to be way higher than most guys' rushing production. And, of course, you don't need to even draft Cam as a QB 13 because he's going a good 5-6 QBs later. At running back, look, right now I have Sony Michel, RB 35. That was honestly baked in a little bit before this foot injury. He has kind of been on my fade do not draft list throughout this. More of just projection rank, but the ceiling just isn't there. I am not taking Sony in any draft. James White, I have him lower, RB 43, Tariq Cohen, RB 44, Phillip Lindsay, RB 42. The problem with White is he's been so consistent over the years, but the new quarterback does change things, and having a potential healthy Rex Burkhead doesn't help. And, just in the best case scenario for James White, let's say Rex gets hurt and, Cam does feed White a good amount, we're still looking at a guy that's probably going to be an RB2 more weeks than not. I don't see the ceiling. I'm taking all the handcuffs, Madison, Pollard, Edmonds, Murray, all of them I want before James White, because in the worst case scenario, their ceiling is much higher. Julian Edelman is my wide receiver 29, one spot behind T.Y. Hilton, one spot ahead of Deontay Johnson. Certainly willing to flip him ahead of Hilton if this hamstring injury continues to give T.Y. some problems. And, I love Deontay Johnson too, but again, there's something to be said for being that offense's undisputed number one pass game target. Edelman is, in my opinion, the cheapest guy you can find out there, because you have your Marquise Browns of the world who might be their team's number one wide receiver, but they also have that high volume tight end. So I think Edelman is your cheapest number one pass game target available in fantasy. Asiasi, I don't even have these rookie tight ends ranked inside the top 40 at the moment. And it's, hey, maybe they do break into it, but I just don't think there's a scenario in 2020 where the Patriots field anything resembling a borderline tight end 1, maybe even tight end 2 in the fantasy world. So Patriots win total all the way down at 9 this year, and we have the Buffalo Bills also at 9. So, the question is, can the Patriots keep this AFC East streak going? Man, I'm not going to bet against Belichick and these guys. I am going to take the over 9 wins. I wouldn't bet my life against it. I do think the Bills are a much more complete team. No one really got hit harder on the COVID opt-outs than the Patriots, just specifically on their defense. Things aren't going to be easy, but it's one of these situations where they just had one of the best defenses like in recent league memory, almost ever. And, even removing some key guys from that, you still have arguably the best cornerback room in the league. They generate pass rush seemingly just out of will sometimes in some seasons. Never been in a position, they paid for, and they just continue to have one of the best secondaries and pass defenses in the league. So I'm giving Belichick, just kind of the benefit of the doubt at this point. I always thought the tanking thing was just absolutely absurd. I mean, it's one thing to think the Patriots won't be in a position to win the Super Bowl. It's another one to imply that Belichick could win 1 or 2 games all season to try to get Trevor Lawrence. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Football is not a game where you can actively ask your players not to play hard. There's going to be injuries. Now, tanking is when your front office puts the team in such a bad position that there's no way they could possibly win. I mean, the only team in the league I think that is even somewhat doing that right now is the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I mean, you could also just argue that they're really giving Minshew his real chance that I believe he earned last season. But no, I do not think the Patriots are under any circumstances tanking this year. I don't think it's in Belichick's blood, and I will take over 9 wins. It's going to be a dogfight with the Bills, I think, for that AFC East crown, but I would put the Patriots as a slight favorite to do so. So that will be it, everyone. Thank you for listening. This has been your 2020 New England Patriots fantasy football team preview. I'm Ian Hartitz, and until next time.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel, and if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.